Go ahead, Stuart.
One more time, Mr. Chair, are you able to hear me?
We can, yes.
Thank you and good afternoon. We wanted to provide you with an update on MVEST, a critical revenue source for our transportation programs, and provide a snapshot of the financial outlook for our transportation programs as we come out of an extremely successful 2021 legislative session. With me and able to answer any questions are Judge Shetnan, the Council's Director of Governmental Operations, and Ed Petrie, Finance Director at Metro Transit. Lori, can you go to the first slide? First, we wanted to discuss our receipts from the motor vehicle sales tax, or MVEST, with you. The Council receives 36% of the total MVEST dollars that are collected in the state. Each November, the Department of Revenue updates a forecast of the anticipated MVEST revenues going forward, and this forecast is used to build our unified budget. The forecast is then updated by revenue each February, which is part of the overall state forecast the legislature uses to balance the budget. This slide shows the four most recent revenue forecasts. Starting at the bottom is the February 2020 forecast, the last forecast before the pandemic. As a result of the pandemic, an updated forecast for state fiscal year 2021 was done in May of 2020. The key number in that forecast was the fiscal year 21 amount of $263.4 million, which would have meant a drop of $54.2 million to the council in the upcoming year. At that time, as the pandemic was beginning and we were all sheltering in place and hoarding hand sanitizer, we thought that that forecast was optimistic. As we'll show in a moment, though, we were happy to find out that this was not optimistic. You can see that in the succeeding forecast in November 2020, and this past February, the projections have bounced back to pre-pandemic levels. I'd have you focus on the changes from year to year in the February 2021 forecast, where MVEST would grow 6.1% in 22 to $331.8 million, grow 3% in 23 to $341.8 million, grow 5.05% in 24, and another 5.9% in 25. We are now using the February 2021 forecast in all of the financial modeling we'll discuss in a few moments. Questions on this slide? Lori, if you want to go to the next one then. The next slide then adds our actual receipts for fiscal year 21 to the forecast. You can see that fiscal year 21 was an outstanding year for us, exceeding the forecast by $34.9 million, or 11.1%. The only time our MVEST receipts appeared to take a direct hit were state fiscal year 20 in the months of March, April, and May. By June of that year, they'd rebounded and we received a total of $291.6 million in state fiscal year 20. The key question for us will be how the Department of Revenue adjusts their forecast this November based on what happened in 2021. You can see that our 2021 actuals exceed the amount they'd most recently forecast for us in 2023. This past year has been a strange economic year, with low interest rates now giving way to increased inflation, fewer people driving to work, but reduced air and business travel, key supply component and raw material shortages, and low gas prices. We'll be watching the MVEST receipts going forward very closely and be extremely interested in the November 21 forecast. So far, the economy overall has continued to outperform the financial forecast. MMB just announced the general fund receipts exceeded their February forecast by 11.1 or 11.2%, or $2.7 billion. Questions here Mr. Chair?
I'm not seeing any.
Lori, if you want to, thank you. On the next slide, we wanted to transition to our long-term financial forecast for the transportation program. First, as covered for me and as all financial professionals would do at this point in the program, I'd emphasize this is a forecast. It is built on dozens and dozens of assumptions in each of our programs: Metro Mobility, commuter and light rail, and bus operations, including planning and fixed route services. It is already wrong. One of my colleagues who we regularly review these forecasts with refers to it as, quote, false precision. In any time, forecasting for a program of this scope over 8 years is difficult. Doing it as we come out of a historic pandemic makes it even more so. First, a quick orientation to the table. This is what we called current law in May as we entered the conclusion of this legislative session. This only includes the operating budget. The 4 periods are each a 2-year state fiscal year biennium, starting with the 2021 biennium. We've taken our amended 21 budget and the current draft of the 22 budget and baked in what we consider base revenues and operating expenses, then built it out from there. The first 2 lines are meant to infer revenues and expenses that are recurring in nature and already built into our existing operations to show our existing structural position. We then add to the analysis 3 more important one-time sources of funds: the one-time state appropriation that was made to Metro Mo last biennium, the federal pandemic relief funds, and the one-time reserves above the prescribed minimums set in policy we'd anticipate needing to use. We also then add expenses to an important new initiative for transit safety, funded exclusively in the first few years by council revenues, and to reflect the council's decision to set aside $94 million in one-time funds for critical capital maintenance. Some key assumptions that are baked into this analysis: again, it's based on the February 21 MVEST forecast. There's a fare increase of 10% assumed in January 1st of 2026. The orange, gold, B as in boy, D as in dog lines coming on as they are currently scheduled. Metro Mobility returning to pre-pandemic service levels in 2022, but bus and rail with a slower recovery returning to 90% of pre-pandemic levels in 2025. We'll get more into the specifics of the MTS and Metro Transit's plans and assumptions in coming weeks as we bring forward the 2022 budget in August. There's 2 key strategies for the federal relief fund that I wanted to note. First, we would spend the CARES dollars first, then ARP funds, then the CURSA funds. The ARP funds were the only funds that must be spent by a certain date. You may recall that these funds were the most recently approved relief package passed by Congress. Secondly, we'd use the federal relief dollars on eligible expenses to cover the fare expense gap in each mode every 6 months, maintaining or building reserves in each program during this time. We weren't setting aside the federal money for a separate rainy day in a specific program. We were spending them on eligible expenses as they were incurred. So some key takeaways you might have from this slide. First, the federal pandemic funds would run out the end of calendar year 2024. With the federal funds and the use of reserves, we'd make or almost make it through state fiscal year 24-25 biennium. The fiscal cliff we've alluded to is deferred now until the state fiscal year 26-27 biennium, but would have been a massive $194 million challenge over those 2 years, more than half of which, $101.2 million, would have been in Metro Mobility. Again, all of this shouldn't convey a sense of false precision, but it is consistent with the numbers we've shared publicly in the past regarding our fiscal cliff. So I'll stop and ask questions there.
Anybody have questions? All right, go ahead, sir.
Lori, you want to go to the last slide? Last week, Judd discussed all of the successes in the 2021 legislative session during his presentation to the Committee of the Whole. This slide represents an update to our forecast based on the legislative decision to forecast and fully cover Metro Mobility's financial obligations beginning in state fiscal year 26. After many, many years of effort, the chair and Judd and Mary were successful in getting the state to fully fund Metro Mobility in advance. The news is even better than is reflected here, as the state will also cover the unfunded capital costs of the program, which are not included in these tables. So this table illustrates the improvement to the financial picture made by eliminating Metro Mo's deficit. The fiscal cliff remains deferred until state fiscal year 26, but is substantially reduced. Again, congrats to all the council members and the staff who worked successfully on this issue this session. So Judd, I'm not sure, I think I saw Judd jump on if he's wanted to add anything to that, or we'd stand for questions.
Thanks, Stuart. I do not have anything else to add. We covered, as you mentioned, a lot of this at the council meeting when I give the legislative update, but it's nice to see it reflected in these tables, and it's also nice to see that financial position in state fiscal years 2026-27 is a more than $100 million less now that we've been able to move the Metro Mobility into a forecasted program. I'd also like to make sure that we recognize the work of the governor's Blue Ribbon Committee on Met Council. This was one of the recommendations that they made, and I think that also played a part in us receiving unanimous support between the Republican-led Senate and Democrat-led House in order to bring this home, because I think all interested parties recognize that this service, through both its federal and state mandated policies, are really something that we need to address. And so, just so the committee members may recall, that in 2019 we moved Metro Mobility into its own appropriation line, and that was a major win for us to get that out of the combined budgets for rail, bus, and Metro Mobility. And then this was the next major step that we made here this last session by getting Metro Mobility now into a forecasted program. So I'm just going to say that that I'm extremely proud of this, and that this is I think a big win for the council, and we have a great team, and a lot of credit goes to the chair and our regional administrator, and then our staff as well, who was very helpful in providing the information and making sure that all parties understood what this meant, including the governor's office and Minnesota Management and Budget. So I think this is something that we can all collectively feel really, really good about, because this is a major success for us. And I spent some time talking with House Transportation Chairman Hornstein just a little bit ago, and both of us spent a lot of time talking about how happy we were that this happened. But let me also mention that we do really have to thank our federal partners for making this even a option for us, because being able to move it out of the tails in fiscal years 24 and 25 really gave us that opportunity to kick that number out in a way that that doesn't impact the next biennial budget, which allowed us to get it done. And so, for a variety of reasons, everything came together. There are many other great aspects of the transportation bill, but as far as looking at where we sit as far as our transportation budget, that was a major win for all of us. So Stuart, other than that, I thought you did a great job. So, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions that the committee might have.
Are there any questions from council members?
Mr. Chair.
Councilor Johnson. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, Judd, I didn't get a chance, and you know, when
I think I lost audio. Councilmember Johnson.
sorry.
Oh, there
Should
we
know
go.
by now. Sorry about that. I just want to say, you know, I didn't get a chance at Council of the Whole to, you know, chime in with my colleagues to congratulate you and the team. And it was a huge effort. And again, Mary Bogey, and, you know, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. And, you know, my district has an interesting relationship with transit, but I can tell you this, the fact that, you know, you guys schooled me and I was able to explain that to our local stakeholders, elected officials and state reps and senators out here. But Metro Mobility is really cherished by everyone. And so I think it became clear, and your efforts to make this bipartisan and really help us get out of this whole sinkhole that we were in is huge. So, you know, it's a high five for Met Council, but it's super high five for the region, because too many people out there just, this is their lifeline, right? So I just wanted to thank you. And again, the whole team, and for helping those of us that are a bit newer on the council early on to really understand what that cliff meant and what was at stake, and to at least be able to relay some of that in our own districts at the ground level. So thank you.
Very welcome.
Any other comments, questions? All right. Thanks, Judd, and thank you, Stuart, for all of your work on this. I think we now have a quorum, so we will call the management committee meeting for Wednesday, July 14th to order. The Metropolitan Council chairs determined that it's not practical or prudent to conduct this meeting in person in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Accordingly, committee members are participating via teleconference or all other electronic means, and the meeting is conducted under the Minnesota statute section 13D-.021 at the time and date stated herein. We encourage all the members of the public to monitor the meeting remotely, and if you have any questions or comments, we encourage the members to email us at public.info@metc.state.mn.us, and we'll respond to those questions in a timely manner. With that, can we call the roll to confirm we have quorum?
Barber,
Here.
Johnson,
Here.
Lilligren,
Here.
Ferguson.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we did make a slight change to the agenda to move the information item up to the beginning so that we could not get too far behind, but we will, with that change, we will move forward with the agenda. We have a motion to approve the minutes for the June 13th meeting.
So moved by Johnson.
Lilligren, second.
Moved by Johnson, seconded by Lilligren. Any comments, questions, changes? All right, seeing none, can we call the roll?
Barber,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, we have three business, and the motion carries. We have three business items that we have. Our first is a labor agreement with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, District Lodge number 77. Marcy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Our Machinists Union is a group of approximately 52 employees that perform primarily maintenance and fabrication work at the Metro plant. Their contract expired on December 31st, 2020. We reached a tentative agreement on June 7th, and the bargaining unit ratified the deal on June 22nd. The agreement reflects the pattern, the wage pattern within the parameters established by this committee, and that includes a 3-year agreement effective January 1 of 2021 through the end of 2023, and a 2% increase in year 1 and year 2, and a 2.5% general wage increase in year 3. There were no other significant changes made to the labor agreement this round. With regard to our Thrive lens analyses, we enhanced stewardship as a settlement that falls within the financial parameters established by the council, as well as prosperity, that we believe it represents a fair and reasonable wage settlement and demonstrates our commitment to our employees. So our proposed action is authorization for the regional administrator to enter into an agreement with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, District Lodge number 77, for a 3-year period beginning January 1, 2021. Questions?
Thank you, Marcy. Are there any questions for the presenter? All right. Any other? Seeing none, can we get a motion to approve business item 2021-149?
Moved by Barber.
All right, moved by Barber. Is there a second?
Second by Lilligren.
Seconded by Lilligren. So it's moved by Barber, seconded by Lilligren. Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, can we call the roll, please?
Barber,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Thank
And
you.
the motion carries. Our second business item that we have on the agenda is 2021-171, Council Property Insurance Contract Renewal. Phil, are you? Yeah, there you are.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
you're
Mr.
up.
Chair, can you hear me okay?
We can.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee members. This business item is seeking authorization for the council to bind its property insurance effective August 1st of 2021 to August 1st of 2022, an amount not to exceed $3,650,000. Now, this property insurance, the coverage is for physical damage to the council property, our buildings, equipment, buses, trains, but also for extra expense, which is oftentimes just as important. And that is coverage for expenses that we would incur to continue our operations in the event of a physical loss. Another coverage that we have that's rather significant with this program is flood protection. We have significant exposure with our treatment plants, so this we have a pretty high limit for protection for a loss that results from a flood. So for the past 3 years, we have been with AXA XL, and we have been afforded a rate guarantee through, from them, which has been very beneficial because in that same time period, the insurance industry has become significantly difficult for an insurance buyer. Rates have increased dramatically. Coverage that used to be in place that would be readily available 3 to 5 years ago is not the case anymore. So we knew going into this renewal that we were going to see a significant rate increase just because of the fact that our rate had held flat, and we had a pretty competitive rate 3 years ago. And that was proven to be true. I think I'd mentioned to this committee before that what I was anticipating going into this renewal was up to a 50% rate increase. And that came to fruition with the initial indications from the insurance market. So we continue to negotiate with the carriers. We continue to work on a couple coverage issues that they've brought up. And we're trying to get the rate down as low as we can, but the $3,650,000 reflects the indication that we're seeing from the market today. So with that, Mr. Chair, again, the action is that we're seeking authorization to bind coverage for a property insurance in the amount not to exceed $3,650,000. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the presenter? Phil, I had a quick question for you. So I think we, on a different kind of insurance, talked about potentially looking at a captive kind of a program and maybe even a captive with other government agencies. And I just wondered, is that an option on the PNC side where, you know, we would fund our own captive and had reinsurance at certain limits, or is that an option, not an option in this market?
Mr. Chair, committee members, that is absolutely an option, and that is one of the driving forces. Given how the property market has been over the last few years, Given the coverages that we need and the exposures that we face, this is something that we would roll into the captive. We would look to see how feasible that may be. And it's a couple different situations. We could have a captive set up so that it kind of it fits into the gaps of coverage lapses that we may have, or coverage areas where we don't have the coverage we need. This policy and our captive could fall in between there to provide us a little extra protection in addition to a primary coverage. Or we can roll the whole thing into a captive as well. So it is something we're going to roll in there, absolutely.
And do you think that'd be something we do on our own, or would we do it with other agencies to make the to make it an even bigger program?
Mr. Chair, committee members, it is something that we're exploring, not only from an insurance standpoint, but with other coverages that might help out other public entities with the insurance piece. Again, a captive would be where we would have an insurance company, and we would be able to fund that and reap the benefits that an insurance company would have. So if we have favorable losses, we have premiums that we don't have, that might be returned to us after the policy period, we would reap those benefits. We could structure it to have different members be a part of the captive. So other public entities, or other entities for that matter, instead of going to the traditional insurance market, if they met the criteria that we would put forth within our captive from a risk standpoint, from a pricing standpoint, they could absolutely participate that into the program. And that would be segregated. That would be their own, it would be like an insurance company with different insureds. So this would be, they would be financing that on their own. It wouldn't be our money financing their risk, but they would be able to participate in the program that we have, that we'd be able to get because of the leverage that of our insurance program, our overall size and the property and casualty. So it's something we're looking into. It's a really, it's a great opportunity for a lot of different reasons, and that's one of them.
So that would be a next fiscal year. We'll write this policy in this fiscal year, and then when the renewal comes up next year, we would have that in at least to consider as an option by that point.
Yes, Mr. Chair, committee members, that is the plan, to have this in place this year so that as we start rolling into next year's insurance policies, we can start looking at not only the property, but other possibilities as well, other coverages as well.
And just are the other members of the committee familiar with what an insurance captive is? I think we talked about it at one point, but trying to make sure everybody's familiar, because it'll be, I think it's obviously a change. I think it's a very good change for us. We want to make sure that as we vote that through our committee and then through council, ultimately, that people are quite familiar with the change that we would be taking on at that point. So if people have questions, definitely don't hesitate to, reach out, and let's make sure everybody's comfortable with that as we move forward with that program. So, and as I think I've shared before, I've seen it work very well in other markets. So I think it's lots of private sector people are doing captives for the very reasons that Phil has laid out. So I think it's very prudent for him to be looking at it and bringing it to our attention as an option and as a way for us to reduce our cost and take advantage of our lower losses that we've historically had, and all the other good management processes that we have to minimize those losses. So instead of an insurance company profiting on that, we profit from that and leave the money in the captive to buy down premiums later. So with that, are there any other questions from council members? All right, seeing none, can I get a motion to approve business item 2021-171, council property insurance renewal proposal to not exceed?
Lilligren moves.
Moved by Lilligren,
Johnson seconds.
seconded by Johnson. Is there any other discussion? All right, seeing none, can we call the roll, please?
Barber, Barber, John. Oh, did I hear her?
We did, yeah.
Okay. Johnson, Johnson,
Aye.
thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay,
Now I
thank you.
can. Thank you. Lilligren,
Aye.
thank you. Ferguson,
Aye,
thank you.
and the motion carries. Our last business item that we have is business item 2021-169 Network Equipment Refresh Program, contract 20P261.
Good afternoon, and thank you for extending time on your agenda today. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great, thank you. My name is Teresa Nisler, Assistant Director of IS Finance and Budget, here with Jody Jacoby, Director of Contracts and Procurement. We're here to present business item 2021-169, along with representatives available from the Office of Equal Opportunity and Information Services for any questions you may have. This business item for network equipment refresh, contract 20P261, not to exceed $6 million for the upcoming 3 years, includes funding for critical purchases for D-line and Green Line extension. We've worked for multiple years to get a large equipment solicitation effort completed, and with the help of our partners within IS, Contracts and Procurement, Office of Equal Opportunity, and Office of General Counsel, we've been able to bring this item forward. We were able to obtain a higher discount than we've had in the past by utilizing this strategy, and it's very rewarding to see it come to fruition. Regular small volume procurements comprised of only a few items typically receive a discount at or near the state contract minimum of 43.5% for hardware. Larger purchasing efforts frequently produce a discount of 52 to 54%. Occasionally, we've obtained, for projects that are very large, such as C-Line VRT, 57%. With this solicitation, we received a 64% discount, which equates for every $1 million spend between $70,000 and $205,000 of savings over what we would have traditionally seen. This is an example of our efforts to obtain the best pricing possible while providing the goods and services that our customer departments require as they continue to grow their services. Bids received range from 40.5% to 64% discount off list price. Insight Public Sector, Inc. is the low, responsive, and responsible bidder and is recommended for award. The proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to award and execute contract 20P261 with Insight Public Sector, Inc. for the refresh of network equipment in an amount not to exceed $6 million. With that, we're happy to take any questions you may have.
Are there any questions from council members? So just so that all the other, if council members haven't been made aware, just is aware, there's been this particular contract and there's been another contract in the same space where we've had a lot of complaints from DBE suppliers in our marketplace that there's a strong belief that there are subcontracting opportunities and that somehow we are, in essence, our OEO office determined that there weren't any subcontracting opportunities. And so I think for us, it is it's in some ways, I think it's disappointing that we are not able to find some of these subcontracting opportunities. I think it's also led us to really think hard about how we look at some of these procurements and how we evaluate what opportunities exist in the contracts for subcontracting and thinking about how we make them available to be more competitive to some of our MCUB and DBE suppliers that exist in our marketplace. My sense is there's nothing wrong per se with the procurement, but that we have things that as we move forward with future procurements that we need to really think about how we're bringing these procurements to market, how we are evaluating what goals should be there, how we're identifying who could possibly be working as subcontractors and encouraging those opportunities to happen when they are available in the marketplace. And so I think it's one where I think, my recommendation would be to move forward with the procurement, but I do think we need to be really thinking differently around how we bring these types of projects forward in the future, and how we think about goal setting and contract packages in the future, so we can be more inclusive of some of the DBs that are starting to grow and be of size in these spaces, and have opportunities to bid on the work. So Jody, maybe, I know you've had some opportunities to think about this. Maybe you just want to share a little bit just with other council members as to the work you and your team are doing in this space.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and council members. Jody Jacoby, Director of Procurement Department. And we continue in procurement to partner with business units like IS to really package these projects in a way that not only meets the business needs, but it's also really advancing equity and inclusive contracting outcomes. We've had a number over the last, just over the summer so far, a number of individual meet and greets with the Office of Equal Opportunity and the business units with our targeted vendors to really connect them with project managers, to help them get an introduction, help them talk about their business, and then a two-way conversation really to help them understand how the bidding process or the proposal process works, but really to give them sort of a one-to-one relationship to help them from the start throughout the finish. But we're really looking to listen and learn and change the way we do business so we have some different outcomes. On this specific project, as Chair Ferguson mentioned, there were some concerns about some of the certification that was required in the procurement, and through some additional due diligence with the project management and with IS, it was confirmed that that level of service certification for this specific and intensive work was not only important, so it was essential. And so we're working again to make sure that the procurement has the right specifications, not overly, not restrictive at all, but just the right specifications, and then unbundling where it's appropriate so we can get some different and inclusive contracting outcomes. So we continue to repackage and really look at all options to try to have a different outcome. Thank you.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really appreciate that additional information and explanation on how we're trying to better achieve, some of the goals that we have. So within the whole scope of work that you're all working on, is there kind of a built-in timeline or project timeline that would help us, in 1 year know how, some benchmarks on how we're doing in this area? Or are you still kind of exploring how to put something like that together? And kind of measuring along the way how impactful we can be to kind of turn the corner on some of this?
Jody, I don't know if you want me to address that first, and certainly add if you would like. It is a continued focus across IS as well as all departments, obviously. And we continuously look at where opportunities avail themselves. We have been successful in other solicitations over the past few years in obtaining responses from MCUBs recently for both consultant contracts and equipment procurements. As we continue to look at ways to grow this area and improve both our requests out to the market, but also the results from an MCUB perspective. We've also utilized MCUBs in our Oracle procurements over the past few years, which have been significant. So no, it is a strong commitment and a continuous focus. And we've met on an ongoing basis with procurement and contracts and with OEO, and actually just had a meeting recently where we were strategizing about new ways to improve the results as we go. Jody, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa. Mr. Chair and Councilmember Johnson. Yeah, in addition to what Teresa mentioned, procurement and OEO is there as well. I don't want to overlook all the incredible work that they're doing because it is a collaborative effort of everyone working together strategically. And we have regular meetings and we talk about current project and upcoming projects. And with upcoming projects, we are having the project managers think about what targeted vendors would be applicable to either being a prime or a sub on the work. Also looking at the work as a whole and unbundling it. Maybe there's better opportunities if we look at the work as a whole, but have some more unbundling options to give more access to those firms to be able to bid or propose. We're also talking a lot about the options with procurement. If it is less than $25,000, the project's managers have an opportunity to collect one quote and get a purchase order issued. It's a much higher threshold for if you're using an MCUB provider and local funds. You can do a purchase order up to 25,000 versus a non-MCUB, it's only up to 10,000, and then you have to have 3 quotes. Or if the procurement is up to 175,000 and there's 3 MCUB vendors available to provide that good or service, we're sheltering it off and only soliciting proposals or bids from those MCUB firms only. That certainly takes a lot of work and a lot of communication and really partnership. And I feel like we're starting to get some really great traction and behavior changes. And we're talking about the statistics and the data. We're really starting to look at that closely. And in the next few weeks, I'll be back here with Cy Jordan and her team to present the second quarter procurement summary. And we've already seen some incremental changes, but we also know that we have some development as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think, that's really, really good information. And, as you find successes, then how do you scale that or, remove more barriers and put, I don't want to be too specific, but, put some structure around that regarding benchmarks, and goals. Maybe you're already doing that within your whole plan, but I really like where you're going. I really appreciate it. And, we've been talking about it for a while. And again, I thank you, Chair Ferguson, for your leadership on this, because I know you and members on this committee and others have been pushing for it. So thank you.
And I think probably the best way to sort of explain where we are is, I think 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, we came in, there was already a good groundwork that was laid by the previous council. We had some very specific goals. Our strategic plan that we provided the governor related to equity and to our spend. So we have sort of a vision around that. We modified some of our policies and to allow our team to do more. We are constantly, and we are still looking at other policies that we could change or might want to change. And I think the phase we're really in now is just there's the practicality side of both, we can have all of our divisional leaders be completely bought in, but then we still have to actually execute on individual contracts. And, there could be a single missed email somewhere along the way that causes, a problem, or, we could have a contract that we've been using that contract for 20 years and it has a certain term or a certain phrase that was put in by Cisco 20 years ago and it made a ton of sense back then, but we don't realize even that it necessarily blocks out certain people from bidding. So we're sort of in this phase now, I think, where there's a lot of, really kind of like lower level blocking and tackling of working through the details with some of our MCUBs and our DBs and understanding what some of those challenges are and us evaluating whether or not it's really something we need or it's just something that's been there forever, and starting to look at eliminating some of those barriers. And I think we will be coming back to this committee with some other ideas on policy changes that are enhancements, maybe the best way to put that, to allow Jody and Cy and their teams to continue to do more. The data piece is a critical part. I think if we ask all of our divisional leaders, that is the one piece we hear from all of them, that to understand the data on even, a layer or two below them, who's spending what and how much of that spend is with our MCUB suppliers and our DB suppliers. So they can see how, what's coming up, who's spending what, where, and we can start to understand that. And there's a project going on right now that will, when completed, and I think it's fairly soon, will be able to provide us and also all of our business unit and operational leaders better insights into that spend and in a much more of sort of a real time and not sort of a quarterly aggregate piece. So we are, we are making progress along our plan of being better at this, but we also know that we have lots more work to do to get to where we'd like to be. I think it's important, the commitment that we have from our regional administrator and our head of procurement and our heads of our divisions is that, and our OEO office is absolutely critical in making this happen. So, I think we're moving in the right direction. We'd all like to see it happen, instantly. We just not unfortunately the way it works. But as long as we're in very good conversation and frankly, we have to be open to criticism from businesses in the community when we stub our toe and do things wrong. We have to understand that and then fix it for the next time, right? And not take great offense when that happens, because it's going to happen. There's going to be things that we don't even realize are problems. And so I think our team is doing a very good job of continuing to move that process forward. So with that, is there any other questions about the business item? And so that we can. All right, seeing none, is there a motion to approve business item 2021-169 network equipment refresh contract 20P261?
Moved by Barber,
Moved by Barber,
seconded by Johnson.
seconded by Johnson. All right. Any other discussion? Can we call the roll, please?
Barber,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson, do you have a motion?
I do, Mr. Chair. I move to close this meeting under section 13D.03 subdivision 1 of the Minnesota statutes so we can consider a labor development and negotiations related to labor strategies.
Lilligren seconds.
Seconded by Lilligren. Is there any other discussion? So as a governing body of a public entity by majority vote in the public meeting, we may decide to hold a closed meeting under the provisions of section 13D.03 subdivision 1B of the Minnesota statutes. The discussion at this meeting will be, as defined by law, will be combined to labor negotiation strategies, developments, and/or discussions and reviews of labor proposals. The proceedings of the meetings that are closed will be tape recorded, preserved for 2 years, and made available to the public as provided by law. Can we get a roll call vote on this motion, please?
Barber,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we close this meeting to discuss labor strategies, I would like to inform the public that who are monitoring this meeting, and for the record, that the committee will adjourn immediately after the discussion of this information item, and that the committee will not have any discussions or conduct any business after this information item is complete. For the record, please note that this meeting was closed to the public at 2:55 p.m. on July 14th.